When I first started my business, I realized one thing. The only way I could go from $1 million to $10 million a year with selfpublishing.com was by creating playbooks. I'm gonna break down the 5 most impactful playbooks that I use in my company and how you can build your own. Now, this is exactly how I scaled from zero and in fact, broke college dropout to $70 million over the last 10 years. That's how I got on Forbes 30 under 30. It's how we built one of the Inc. 5000 fastest growing private companies in the US. Now, before I get into it, what's a playbook? I've got a whole entire other video on that, but to simplify it, it's a set of plays that you need to run and scale your business. Let's get into the first one. Now, number 1, you need a SAM playbook. When I was struggling in my business early on, I remember a mentor said, Chandler, you need to meet Sam. I said, okay, awesome. Who's Sam? Why do I need to know him? He said, Sam is sales and marketing. All right, SAM is sales and marketing. And if you don't have a sales and marketing playbook in your business, you don't have any sales and you don't have business. So a SAM playbook or a sales and marketing playbook comes down to a few things. Number 1, you need a repeatable product to sell with product market fit. Now I teach this process. It's called the 4 Ps of a best-selling offer. And the 4 Ps are person, pain, promise, price. So you need to get super clear on who are you selling this to, right? Not just avatar, someone you actually know. What's the pain that they have that they know that they have? Because no pain, no sale, right? But then also, what's the promise, the compelling promise that you're making with your product? And then lastly, what's the price? So what's the price to value ratio where they'd be stupid not to buy your product and not to do business with you? Now, once you have that repeatable product, right? And the emphasis is on repeatable because you can get to $1 million a year without a repeatable process. Maybe you've been there where you're just customizing everything, right? But this is where you're productizing your service or you're creating a repeatable product mechanism. Really, really important. Once you got that though, now we need 2 things. We need traffic. So we need eyeballs who are interested in working with you. Now this could be earned traffic or this could be paid traffic, right? So you can go affiliates, you can go content, you can go all that stuff, or you can just do paid media. So paid traffic. And then number 2, you need a sales mechanism. All right. And so this is where most people overcomplicate things. They tell you you need a value ladder. They tell you that you need a 17-step funnel. You need all these products. No, you just need people to sell to, a product to sell, and to get on the phone with them or some sort of sales mechanism. All right. Now, obviously, if you're in e-com or that sort of thing, well, that sales mechanism is going to be a sales page. But early on for most people, that sales mechanism, especially if you got a high ticket product, it's a phone call. Right? And that phone call, the part of that sales playbook that you need is you need a conversation structure. Okay? Because this is going to help you go from you doing all the sales to someone else doing it. Is how do you reasonably take someone from, hey, I'm kind of interested, to here is my credit card in a 30-minute call, 45-minute call, hour-long call. That's the sales mechanism. Now I want to stop here and just say that everything else is noise. Okay? When you're building out this SAM playbook, you need a repeatable product to sell. You need eyeballs, and you need a sales mechanism. Literally everything else is noise. So focus on those things, and that's how you scale your sales to 8 figures a year. So at this point, building out this playbook, you're probably in one of 2 places. Either number 1, you've got nothing. In that case, you need to talk to 10 people about signing up to do business with you. All right, nothing else matters. Now, on the other side, if you're already in $1 million a year, you probably have some of this stuff. Now you just need to document it. So what I recommend doing is go through and document everything. So you can just record yourself as you go through the process and then get it into a doc. You can even have your assistant help you with this process. We'll talk about that later in the video. But what is your repeatable process that you're selling? What's included? What's the pricing? All that stuff. What's your traffic mechanism? How do you market? And then what's your sales conversation structure so that you can take someone from browser to buyer? Document all of that. And then later in the video, we'll talk about hiring your first person to run this playbook. Number 2, fulfillment playbook. This is so important. All right, you've got sales and then you've got fulfillment. And there's really only 2 things that you should be doing in your business. All right, you should be getting new customers and you should be making customers happier. If it's not in one of those 2 buckets, you shouldn't be doing it. All right. And I'm going to argue that this second bucket, you should get out of it directly as soon as possible. We've all been in this sales fulfillment yo-yo, right? Where you sell, sell, sell. Oh my gosh, we got so much work. Fulfill, fulfill, fulfill. oh crap, we've got no sales. I got to get back to sales. I don't want you to get caught in that trap. And chances are, if you're at $1 million a year, you're probably caught in that trap, especially if you're the artisan or if you're the person doing the work, right? So this doesn't matter whether you're in a construction business, whether you're in a knowledge-based business, whether you're in the high ticket space. If you're selling and fulfilling, you're trapped. All right. So what you got to do here is you got to document everything in your fulfillment process. Okay. And so what I'd recommend is the next client that you work with, use that as a case study. All right. And document every part of the process. So what happens from the time that they give you their credit card to the time that they're referring you business or renewing or saying, hey, that was awesome. All right. Giving you a testimonial. Everything in the middle of that needs to be documented. So this is, most importantly, it's a repeatable process that leads to happy customers. Okay. And you've got maybe the V1, the what you do, and then the V2, which is what's possible and what can be done. And then secondly, you need to delegate all fulfillment ASAP so that you can drive growth. All right. So document, delegate, and then you can get back to driving growth. Now, remember, if you don't have sales, you don't have a business. So if you don't have sales yet, skip this playbook. All right. Just skip this playbook. You need to get customers. All right. But if you do have sales, maybe you're at that $1 million a year part, document, delegate, get out of the weeds of fulfillment so that you can get back to driving growth. The most important KPI for playbook number 2, your fulfillment playbook, is your NPS. So your net promoter score, which is basically just how likely are customers to recommend working with you, right? Do they recommend your business to someone else? Now, kind of some subsets of this is they're not refunding, right? They're also probably referring you business. They're also probably doing business with you again. But it all comes back to, are you predictably making your customers happier? Now, you might be thinking here, my process or myself, I'm just so unique. I can't playbook this, right? There's no way I'm possibly going to be able to train someone else to do what I do. First off, I'd say you're wrong. Everything in your business can be broken down into a repeatable process. All right. But if that's kind of your hang up, I would recommend following this process, which is I do, you watch, you do, I watch, and then you do. All right. So it goes back to what we just talked about. First off, you document it. Right. And so you're doing it and documenting it at the same time. Then secondly, once you've got that person hired, you do it and they watch. All right. So this is part of the delegation process. Then thirdly, now you do it and I watch, and I'm going to give you feedback afterwards. And then fourthly, you do it. Number 3, your hiring playbook. This is quite possibly the most important playbook in your business. And it's also, I think, one of the best things that we do at selfpublishing.com. Think about it this way. Most people will cut corners on hiring, right? Because by the time you need to hire someone, guess what? You don't have the time to do that stuff, right? That's why you're hiring in the first place. So you think, how do I just get a warm body into this role and into my organization as fast as possible? I think about it totally differently. Why would I spend 5 hours, 10 hours hiring someone that I'm going to then spend years and thousands of hours working with, right? Wouldn't it probably make sense to just spend a little bit more time in the hiring process, right? So if you're tempted to cut corners in the hiring process and say, hey, I got a cousin's brother who can do this, right? It's the fastest solution is often the worst solution in the hiring process. And instead of doing that, you need to follow the 4 S's of hiring. And there's a really great book called Who. All right. And it talks about the 4 S's. So it's scorecard, source, select, and sell. Now I'll break this down. All right. Number 1, it starts with a good scorecard. This is a job scorecard. You might be thinking, what's a job scorecard? This is exactly what you're expecting someone to do. All right. So we've got templates of this and how we do it, but we're going to walk through, hey, what's the purpose of the role? First off, what's the title of the role? Amazing. You're thinking of this unicorn that you want to hire, and that's not a job. That's a unicorn that doesn't exist. So you need to start with a title. What's the purpose of this role? Then most importantly, what are the top 3 KPIs that this person is going to be accountable for, right? KPI is key performance indicator. So what are the top 3 KPIs? And then maybe what are the competencies that they need to have, the experiences that they need to have, all that stuff. All right. So we got a rule at selfpublishing.com. We don't hire without a scorecard. Because just how much that forces you to crystallize even what you're looking for is going to help you find better candidates. It's going to help you be more clear about what you're looking for. And it's going to lead into the second S, which is source, right? So now we move into sourcing candidates. Well, we've got a clear idea of what we're looking for, so it's much easier. So now we're going LinkedIn, we're going Indeed, we're going referrals, we're going word of mouth. Like I've got a whole hiring playbook on this whole process. And I've also got a recruiting 201 video that walks through all the stuff of how we source. So check that out if you want to go into the weeds. But the point here is you're getting this out to everybody. All right. Now, once you've got candidates, now my rule of thumb is you need at least 50 candidates for every open position. Now, I realize this might be a little bit more difficult if you're recruiting locally, right? And I've recruited locally and remote. And remote, my role is 100 plus, right? Because that's how I know that I'm going to have good candidates is by pure volume of numbers. Because if you got 3 candidates and you interview one of them and then you hire them, I got no comparison. Right? How do I know if you're good? I haven't talked to enough people. So you need to source enough candidates so that you see the candidate pool, and then you move into the third S, which is select, right? So you need to select the best candidate. Now that means multiple interviews. All right. If you get on a 15-minute call or a 30-minute call and then say you're hired at the end of that call, what do you think the odds are that that person's going to do a good job in your organization? Slim to none, right? So you need to have a whole interview process to make sure, hey, I've got the screening interview. I've got a focused interview. So do you have the competencies to actually do the job, right? Screening is, hey, is there just a baseline alignment? What are your goals, right? What are you looking for? All that stuff. Then now, can you actually do the role? Then I'm going to do a work history interview and see, hey, have you actually delivered results like this in the past? That's my litmus test for hiring someone great. If you simplify this whole playbook into one thing, it's hire people who have done the thing you need them to do, right? So in that interview process, I'm trying to figure that out, right? But I'm also trying to make sure that it's a mutual fit, and I'm trying to scare them away, all right? So I want to make sure, hey, what are you making in your current role? Are you going to be making the same or better here, right? What are your goals over the next 2 to 3 years? Are they aligned with you working here, right? What are your skill sets? Is that aligned to you hitting your KPIs here? All right. So I'm just looking for mutual fit. So that moves into the fourth S, which is sell. Now, the best candidates, you got to sell them on working for you. All right. And so I look at the whole hiring process as really just a sales process. Now it's both parts, right? I'm doing selling while also trying to scare you away and suss out whether or not you're going to be successful here. All right, so you're kind of doing those two things in tandem. So if you wait to the end to sell, it's probably too late, right? But throughout the hiring process, I'm bringing up things that are going to very clearly sell them on working here, right? How awesome the culture is. Maybe the comp is a big benefit for you. Maybe it's the benefits that you have. Find the parts of your organization that really sell candidates and do it all the way up to the point of your job listing, right? One small thing that I do is I do a video on our job listing. Right? It makes it personable. It's a sales page, right? And so, but all the way through the process, I'm trying to figure out where's their head at, what's their objections. Are they thinking about working with other companies? Are they interviewing at multiple places? Like this is a sales process as much as it is a vetting process. So you need to do both. So there you have it. Those are the 4 S's: scorecard, source, select, and sell. Do those 4 things. That's the core nucleus of a great hiring playbook, and your talent will level up. Playbook number 4, your assistant playbook. I've got a friend who has a quote. He says, if you don't have an assistant, you are the assistant. Anybody feel like that in your business? I mean, if you're at $1 million a year and you do not have an assistant, things are probably breaking. Okay. And so what I want you to do is I want you to take your yearly earnings. So over the last year, how much did you earn? I want you to divide that by 2,080. The number that you get is your hourly rate. All right. And you might get that number, and that number might shock you in one of 2 directions. You might say, oh my gosh, that's tiny. That's so low. Or on the flip side, I remember the first time I did this, I said, wow, this is a massive number. And the litmus test here is, am I paying someone to do all the stuff that I could pay someone to do below that threshold? Right? And I remember the first time doing this, I'm like, this is hundreds of dollars an hour. And I can think of dozens of things in my life right now that I'm doing that I could instead be paying someone to do for less than that figure. So I'll do some math for you. If you're making $100,000 a year, that number is $50 an hour. Now, if you're making $1 million a year in profit, on the other hand, that number is almost $500 a year. Okay, so wherever you're at, figure out that number. And then you need to delegate everything below that number. And it starts with hiring a great assistant as soon as possible. In my opinion, this should be one of, if not your first hires. All right. My friend Dan Martell, he has a great saying. He says, don't hire to grow your business, hire to buy back your time. All right. This is a buy back your time kind of hire. Okay. So immediately you're getting back time. Now, a great assistant, they can obviously do stuff for you in your personal life. They can do stuff for you in your business life, but they can probably also handle the minutia that helps drive the business, right? So this might be fulfillment minutia. This might be sales minutia. This might be your email inbox, all the things, right? So first hire, make sure that you hire a great assistant and then use that assistant to free up a minimum of 5 to 10 hours a week in your life immediately. All right. If you don't save 5 to 10 hours immediately by hiring an assistant, you're doing it wrong. All right. And so to do this, you need to audit your personal life and your professional life. I'm a big fan of this. This is weird. I get it. I grew up in a blue collar household. My parents met working night shift at a factory. All right. We were not the type of people who had assistants. In fact, we thought the type of people who had assistants were weird, pretentious, rich people. And it was like, yeah, that's never going to be us. Like, who am I to have an assistant? So I realized there's kind of some mental blocks that you got to get over to even hire someone to do this stuff. And then if we peel back the layers of the onion even further, there's some mental hurdles to personal and executive or business tasks. But my stance on this is an hour is an hour. All right. Whether you're spending that hour getting groceries, doing laundry, making meals, or whether you're spending that hour taking your car to get your oil changed, scheduling meetings, doing emails, the hour still counts the same. And guess what? You only get one of that hour, right? It's a non-renewable resource. So you need to get over all these weird beliefs and weird things that you might have, like I did, and say, hey, if I'm trying to raise my hourly rate, if I'm trying to get to millions of dollars a year in profit, right, which is where I'm at and where we're at selfpublishing.com, you got to raise your average. Right? You got to raise your average. How am I going to raise my average if I'm doing stuff for below that threshold? Well, I got to do two things. I got to delegate everything below the threshold, and then I got to reclaim that time to spend on things that are above the threshold, right? So go through the process, free up 5 to 10 hours a week, hire an assistant. If you don't have an assistant, you are the assistant. Number 5, your operating system or your operational rhythm. All right. You got to build that playbook. I remember when I got out of school, now I dropped out of school. So I dropped out of school before I got to the business classes. And I thought, which I've now found is not true, but I thought that, hey, that was where they taught all this stuff of how to run a business. And I wished, I don't know if you're like this, if you ever wished that someone would just hand you an operations manual, right? It's like a business is one of the only things that you can start it, you can run it, you can whatever, and you don't actually have a manual on how to do that thing. So I remember the first time I read this book called Scaling Up, and it absolutely blew my mind. I felt like finally someone was handing me the operations manual on how to actually run a company. All right. And so there's 2 great books that I recommend off the top here. I recommend that you read Scaling Up, and I recommend that you read Traction. Okay. They've got 2 kind of varying models. I think Scaling Up is a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more complex. Traction is simpler and quite frankly, a lot better for a lot of entrepreneurs. But I like having kind of both viewpoints because you can use those to create operational rhythms in your business. Now, your operational rhythms, they really come down to 4 things. Your people, all right? We talked about hiring great people already. Number 2 is your priorities. Right? So are you focusing on the right things? Number 3 are your KPIs, so your key performance indicators. And number 4 are your accountability mechanisms. All right, so let's break those down. All right, number 1, people, we talked about, do you have A+ players? Secondly, the priorities. This is huge. Your number 1 outcome or thing that you're responsible for as a CEO, as someone running a business, is are you driving strategic priorities that move the needle? Right? If you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there, right? You're not going to. So you got to focus on what are the 2 or 3 things that will most move the needle. And you need to ruthlessly prioritize those things with your time and with your team's time. Now, once you've got that, that's where the KPIs come in. Okay, so KPI stands for key performance indicators. And these are the outcomes that great people and great priorities drive. Okay, the best KPIs, I mean, the most simple ones are, is your revenue growing, right? And is your profit growing? And do you have cash? I love this quote from Keith Cunningham. He says, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is king, right? Revenue is the ultimate vanity metric. So if you get to $10 million a year and you got a 1% profit margin, congratulations. You have a decently high paying job that is on the verge of collapsing at any moment. Right? So that's where profit is sanity. You know, when you're not profitable, you go insane because you're not making any money, but then cash is king. If you don't have cash, you're out of business, right? And a lot of times, if you're at $1 million a year, you might not be thinking about this yet. There's a difference between profitability and cash, right? You can be profitable and run out of cash. And guess what? Your bankers don't care. Your vendors don't care. Your customers don't care how profitable you are if you don't have cash to pay them. All right. So those are the kind of the three most important KPIs in your business and the outcomes that you're driving. But you can go down into controllable versus uncontrollable metrics, or you can go into leading or lagging metrics. That's really how I like to do it. I've got a whole video on that, leading versus lagging, right? So your leading metrics, this is what leads to outcomes, right? And then your lagging metrics are those outcomes. But you at least need basic metrics that show the performance of your business. And then number 4, accountability mechanisms. This is really, really important. There's a lot of ways that you can do this. A lot of people would say that this is where you can put meetings. All right. But meetings really only serve 2 purposes, right? They're for collaboration and they're for accountability, right? And so you don't have to have meetings to have accountability in your business. So I just want to really underscore this because I think this is where when you're in that scale mode from $1 million to $10 million a year, it can just be death by meeting. You have hundreds of meetings. You don't even know why they're happening. Well, who should be there? Why do we have so many people? Is our job to just literally meet all day? No. You're just doing it for collaboration and accountability. So my preference is to have the least amount of meetings possible to facilitate those 2 things. All right. But the accountability mechanisms, sure, you're going to have those in your meeting rhythms, right? So that's where I have people show up to our meetings and they report their KPIs. So if they have a green line or red line on their KPIs and they got to show up to a meeting and report that, well, then guess what? Now they're holding themselves accountable. All right, because if I show up to the meeting 5 days in a row and I say, I got a red day today, I had a red day yesterday, I had a red day yesterday, well, guess what? I don't have to do. Hold them accountable. They're holding themselves accountable, right? So I like to think about what are those core mechanisms that I can just build into the business. This is reporting rhythms. So how do I have 2 or 3 accountability mechanisms on a regular basis so that I don't have to hold them accountable? They hold themselves accountable, all right? But that only happens if you've got good KPIs, good red, green lines, and good accountability mechanisms. So what I encourage you to do as we close is pick one to start, right? Of these 5, which one is the most important, right? Where do you need to focus your efforts first? Nail that one, right? And you'll keep working through the other playbooks and you'll keep scaling your business. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, leave a comment. What was your biggest takeaway or what's the one playbook that you need to focus on first? And I'll see you in the next video.